NZ High Tech Awards is truly, it is the Oscars of the tech industry, right? And it's a fantastic celebration of everything that we've achieved and just shows the overall, purpose and the overall mission, which is, transforming our economy into one that is led by innovation.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.
Greetings and welcome along to the New Zealand Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Spain, and a real privilege to have Marian Johnson joining us for the first time on the New Zealand Tech Podcast. How are you, Marian?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Paul.
Yeah, thanks for coming in. Now, look, congratulations on being added to the New Year's Honours list this year. That is a really huge accolade. Well done. It must make you feel pretty good.
We're super chuffed. I'm super chuffed. I still have the letters on my fridge held down by magnets, and yeah, the kids make fun of me every time they open the fridge, so that's great.
For those that don't know, maybe a sort of a short intro, and we'll delve into the many things that you're involved in. Maybe a short intro you can share for listeners.
Sure. I was the chief exec of Ministry of Awesome, which is a startup hub in New Zealand, working across the country, essentially on very early stage tech-based startups. And I did that for 7 years. I only stepped down in February last year. And then from there, I became the chairwoman for all of their Electrify programs. I don't know if you know about Electrify Aotearoa, but it is New Zealand's Women Founders Summit. So it's very specifically targeted at high growth women founded startups. And what that means is startups that are built to go global from the get-go. So generally they're tech-based. And the summit, Electrify Aotearoa, is now in its, this year will be our 4th year. We started in Christchurch, then went to Auckland, and then went to Wellington. Every year we've been sold out, and the wait list just gets longer and longer. It's been pretty fantastic because the entire sector, the startup sector, our venture capital, our angels, our founders, all of the sort of startup support groups like Creative HQ, Icehouse, et cetera, are really engaged in the process. And government has also been really supportive of Electrify Aotearoa. We generally will have a minister. Last year we had Judith Collins speak, which was fantastic, and that was in Wellington. So Electrify is having a really great impact in terms of doing the 3 things that we set out to do, which is essentially creating role models for women founders so that there was something that they could look at and say, I can be just like that. I can do what that woman is doing. And we're really intentional, making sure that everybody who's on the stages or in the panels are people who are that you can be engaged with as a startup founder. So there's no major celebrities, no one who's unicorn. It's really people who are maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 steps ahead and are really just doing their best to pay it forward. So inspiration, role modeling. The second one is basically gathering the whole talent and all the community together, because we know through Ministry of Awesome that there's nothing better than peer-to-peer support. So you need to have fellow founders, on your wing all the way through the journey. And then the third thing is really getting all of those supporters together to meet this incredible group of talent to make sure that they're getting the connections that they need in order to succeed. It's 100% about network. And the more network you have, the less serendipity is required. And that's what Electrify is all about. And I want to be really, really clear that this is not, Electrify is 100% about growing our economy, because at the moment we are, I think, 51% women, and yet only 1 out of 4 startups in New Zealand have women founders. And so obviously if we can bring more women founders on board, then we'll grow the whole bunch of startups. And since we need about 5,000, we're only at 2,400. The fastest way to do that is to get women on board. And so that's why that's why Electrify is such a cool thing. So that's something that I've been working on for the last 3 years at Ministry of Awesome. And then this 4th year as chairwoman of the Electrify programs. And we're also working on taking it to the States, and there's something there'll be a big announcement on that reasonably soon, and that's going to be a great opportunity for our women founders in New Zealand. The second thing that I'm working on is I'm the chief executive and co-founder of CareerWise, which is an ed tech startup. Essentially, we're creating that connection between talent at high school and all of the tertiaries, employers, potential career pathways that are trying to find their future talent. And this is really about making sure that our youngest people know the opportunities that are coming for them, that there's this incredible breadth of opportunity that maybe their parents, maybe even their career advisors aren't familiar with. So this platform does that job. And I'm really excited about that. We're in 52% of high schools in New Zealand at the moment, and growing largely by word of mouth. And I just took that
That's
over in, was it July this year, maybe August this year. And then the third role, and this is not in order of importance, it's just as it's occurred to me, it's not alphabetical either, is I'm also the chair of the NZ High Tech Trust, which is the incredible group that puts on the New Zealand High Tech Awards. And that is, I believe, kind of the primary purpose of what we're talking about today, because the NZ High Tech Awards is really the platform for our tech sector to tell these stories to the greater New Zealand population.
That's great. Yes, so many really exciting things that you're part of. Before we jump in, big thank you to our show partners, to 1NZ, Spark, 2 Degrees HP, and Gorilla Technology. Yeah, let's delve in a little bit more. I think, sort of for background, folks might be curious. How did you end up in the tech sector? Because before you came to New Zealand, that wasn't sort of largely your world, but you've been very much involved in the tech sector now for a long period.
Yeah, anything that I did previously is like really old hat. Because I've been here now for 19 years. I married a Kiwi. I met him in London when he was on his OE. And then, like all good Kiwis, as soon as they get married and have children, they're like, well, gotta go home. And since I don't really have roots, my father was a diplomat. I moved every 3 years. I was fine. That's fine. We'll go to New Zealand. Where is it? Okay. That sounds fine. So we came to Christchurch, and the industry that basically had my whole career in didn't really exist here. So I had previously been at Universal Studios, TV, launched TV stations, that kind of thing. And that didn't really exist here in Christchurch as a major industry. So I did a variety of things. I guess the first time that I was in tech, I was the GM of a company called Zoom Group, and it was a software developer. And I treated like any other business, and I was utterly hopeless. So that was my first step in tech. I did not understand, basically the basics of a good product manager. Anyone who's ever done custom applications knows that you really need to have some understanding of the sector. But of course, I did not. I was useless. Anyway, but that was my first entry. And then I joined a tech startup. And that's when things really started to get interesting and very exciting. And the tech startup was founded by Powerhouse Ventures. It was called Fluent Scientific. And basically, we were creating a platform that enabled non-native English speakers to learn and practice accentless English, which would help them get university entry or get great employment in the markets they were interested in moving to. Unfortunately, for many reasons, some of which had to do with Powerhouse, some of which had to do with validation, some of which had to do with technology just not being ready for, if we did it now, it'd probably be great because AI is so well developed. But at the time, we were in the very early stages of working around that as a potential technology that would enable the product. Anyway, so Fluent. And then from Fluent, one of the key groups that had helped our startup grow was Ministry of Awesome. And that's when I joined Ministry of Awesome and as their chief exec in 2017. And it's fair to say, our industry grows every year by 24%, Paul, right? So the tech sector is so different than it was in 2017. And it's certainly so different than it was when I first got to New Zealand.
Yeah.
And the job that needed to be done at Ministry of Awesome was essentially assisting tech startups New Zealand tech startups in their earliest stages and making sure that they had absolutely every possible support they needed, whether it was, mentorship or capability training or just plain old connections to potential investors or, you know, or potential board members, advisors. That was the work that we did in those very early days. And I would have to say that Ministry of Awesome was instrumental in the huge growth of Christchurch and Canterbury as a tech sector in New Zealand. I mean, obviously, Canterbury has always been a real hot spot for tech in New Zealand. But I guess what I'm talking about is startups. So tech startups, we kind of helped put that on the map. And then, you know, because that was successful, going from almost nothing to something quite remarkable, many of our founders became from other cities. So I think we now have every city in New Zealand is now, we have founders from every city in New Zealand working through our incubators at Ministry of Awesome and being part of our program. So that's something that's really quite incredible. So that's the journey into tech.
Yeah.
Um, Largely accidental, based on meeting my husband at the Dragon Bar in London.
Amazing how all these dots join up and bring us to today. So you've been involved on the NZ High Tech Awards. You have been involved there since the beginning of 2021 now. So yeah.
Something like that. Something like that. Yeah, there's an incredible group of individuals who run the trust or who are part of the trust, and they come from different sectors, and it's really diverse in terms of the background of people who are involved, some of whom are founders, some of whom are previous investors. And yeah, I'm just really, proud to be working alongside these individuals. I mean, and of course, Swaytech puts on the awards every year, and it is the Oscars of the tech industry, right? And it's a fantastic celebration of everything that we've achieved, and just shows how we continue to grow into the overall, purpose and the overall mission, which is, transforming our economy into one that is led by innovation as opposed to necessarily led by primary industry. The idea being that if we can transform our economy in this way, we can be globally competitive, we can be sustainable, we can lead on the world stage, and we can create high value jobs and lift everyone's boats. So that's the utopia view. And with the astounding growth of our sector all across the country, that's where we're headed. But the thing that's crazy, and the point of the NZ High Tech Awards, is the fact that your average everyday New Zealander just doesn't know about it. When I talk to my neighbors, who have kids at high school age, when I talk to career advisors, as in my chief executive career-wise role, they're still aiming at things like accounting, law. Of course, accounting and law, these are great sectors to go into, but they're not necessarily considering tech unless they are really into coding, or really into software development. And tech is so much more than that, as we all know. There's so many different elements to that, and it's something that we just need to get that reality mainstream. And so that's something that the New Zealand High Tech Awards does by bringing all these people together in the same room and highlighting these incredible companies that every year just blows my mind. They're coming from New Zealand.
Yeah, look, it certainly as a real highlight of the calendar within the tech sector. I think every year it's pretty mind blowing when we look back at what's sort of been achieved over the previous year. What's being achieved on the global stage. I guess it's. It's one of those things that really gives everybody a boost, and something that we need to keep getting behind and keep getting the word out around how exciting it is to be part of the tech sector. Walk us through what's involved with putting together the the high tech awards each year. You know, from your position as chair, you must get a pretty broad view on all the ins and outs and the things that need to happen. I know sort of Sway Tech probably do a lot of the behind the scenes work, but it's a journey that probably spans most of the year, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, they do all the heavy lifting, let's be honest. Bob and his team are responsible for putting on this incredible event year after year and making sure that it's financially sustainable, which means that we need to have, all the incredible partners that we've brought on board that stay on board year after year, because without them, the awards would not happen. And I think it's really important to note that this is not like the awards are not a what's the word? I'm probably not going to use the right word. They're not self-celebratory, if you know what I mean. We're not clapping for ourselves, I mean, obviously we are to some extent, like well done you and well done you. It's not an internal celebration. It is to throw out there role modeling of this is how big you can be. This is the impact you can have. These are the incredible things that you can do. And yes, you are in New Zealand, and yes, you're far away from the rest of the world, but look what your peers are accomplishing. So lift your gaze, lift your ambition, and just go for broke, because there's incredible ingenuity, there's incredible talent in this country, and these things are all possible. And I think that's the role of the High Tech Awards. In terms of what does it take to put it on, I'm not going to talk about the Sway Tech side at all, because they're responsible for the incredible production values, for all of the logistics. I mean, they're on it from, for 12 months a year. The thing that we do as a trust, I think that is most important, is we make sure that there's a really high value in every award that is awarded. So it's meaningful. And if you get a high tech award, that really means you're globally excellent. You've really achieved something incredible. And the way that you do that is just making sure that the integrity of the awards, the process of the judging, the quality of the judges, the short lists, all of them are all of great value, and you can have great respect for your peers in that group. So I think that's the job that the trust needs to do. And of course, there's briefings to Bob and so on, but him and his team are magical. I think it's more about the integrity and the value of the award that the trust guides, through year after year.
What impact do you see the awards having on the winners themselves?
If you've won the award, it immediately says to all of your peers in the industry that you have done something magnificent. It builds your credibility as an organization. It helps you recruit the best possible talent. It essentially says you're one of the top companies in New Zealand in a particular sector.
Yeah, that's great. And I guess if we look at what's coming up, maybe you can walk us through what it all looks like for 2025. The announcements are sort of beginning now, aren't they? And that'll be sort of flowing through, and then we'll get to the awards later on in the year.
Yep. The only major change in terms of the awards this year is that we have changed the focus of one of the categories from, I think it was called hardware, to high tech manufacturer of the year. So instead of being a hardware company of the year, it's a high tech manufacturer of the year. And that was to ensure that we were able to sweep up and be applicable for all of the high tech manufacturers that are out there in New Zealand. I mean, not just involved in, I mean, obviously there's been a huge growth in the aerospace sector and lots of high tech manufacturing taking place here, but that has always been the case. And we've always been really strong high tech manufacturers. We've always had that sector here, but it's not really been celebrated. And so to some extent, it's kind of underground, and we want to bring it above ground, make it really clear to anyone and everyone out there who is interested in the manufacturing sector that this is something that New Zealanders are extraordinarily good at on a global level. In terms of what's coming up for the awards, our entries are now open on the 21st of January in Christchurch, 28th of January in Wellington, and the 29th of January in Auckland are our launch events. And I think it's really important to come along to meet with sponsors and to hear from previous winners and to get some really good insight into what makes a winning entry and what is that winning experience. So you asked earlier, Paul, what happens if you win a high tech awards? Each of these people will be able to say, this is what happened with me and my business following winning the high tech awards. And I think you'll be really quite pleased with the impact that it's had on, each of their businesses. If you're thinking of entering, you're going to get some amazing insight from each of those previous winners on things to do and not do in the applications. We'll also be hearing from judges, and the judges will tell you the things that annoy them the most, the things that are going to get you onto the no pile, the things that might get you onto the yes pile, and what to prepare for, really, because it's a series of obvious cuts. You got your first group coming through of all of the applications, and then understanding there what happens. So from there's a smaller group, and then from that smaller group, you have your list of finalists. Then there's your in-person interviews, how to knock that out of the park. So all these insights are really useful for anybody who's even thinking about being part of it.
Fantastic. And so, okay, so that's the January events, 21st, 28th, and 29th, Christchurch, Wellington, Auckland. And then in March is when the announcements of finalists, the finalist events sort of happen. That's simultaneously across Auckland, Wellington, and Christchurch, 26th of
That's
March?
right. That's right. So we have events that run simultaneously. So every market finds out what the short list is at the same time.
Yeah, that's cool. And then the actual gala dinner and the celebrations taking place this year. Where will that be, and when is that happening?
It's on Friday the 23rd of May, and it's at TSB Arena in Wellington.
Great. Back to Wellington. It's good. I like that they move around the country, and everyone gets a bit of a chance in the main centres. So look forward to that.
I mean, I think it's really important if you're even thinking about it, you should come to one of those launch events, the 21st in Christchurch, 28th in Wellington, 29th in Auckland, and the entries close on Monday, the 3rd of March. And Bob has said to me, please make sure everybody knows. No, they really do. They really do close on Monday, the 3rd of March at 5 p.m. There are no extensions to that. So mark your calendar. And then all of those finalist events take place on Wednesday, the 26th of March in each of those three markets, Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch. I believe that Sarah from United Machinists is potentially working with Sir Ian Taylor on doing a Dunedin event as well, but I'm not sure where it's at, so I don't want to announce it or give any kind of date. But if you're Dunedin, did we say Dunedinites? If you're a Dunediner, just watch that space. If that's happening, we'll have that on the website very shortly.
Okay.
But anyway, entries close Monday, the 3rd of March. And then the finalist event on the 26th of March. Judging takes place in person on the 10th of April. And then obviously the big deal gala event on the 23rd of May in Wellington.
That is really exciting. And the sort of capacity, I guess that's usually comes down a bit to the venue and so on, but tends to be around the kind of 1,000-ish number. I think there's some variance between different locations around the country. Is that
every
right?
year it seems to be hitting a bigger number, but I think we're limited. I believe last year we were at 1,100, if not 1,200. It was quite incredible. Yeah. If you've not been before, I'm sure you've been, Paul, but if you haven't been before and you're listening to this podcast, you definitely want to get a ticket to this event, because it's not only is it an extravaganza of entertainment, but it is truly the absolute lead innovators in our country and in many cases in the world doing first time ever innovation that will blow your mind. I used to judge the startup category when I wasn't the chair. Now it's a bit of a conflict of interest, but I'm so bummed that I can't be part of that because one of the
Yeah.
coolest things about judging the startup category was seeing things that were coming across in those nominations that I did not know about because they're startups, right? So they haven't got their media attention. You haven't seen them anywhere. They're brand new companies that, in some cases, honestly, Paul, I remember one year I was reading the applications and thinking, "Are they joking? This is sci-fi. That can't be real. That can't be that's not real. That's gotta be a joke." And I just checked in with, a couple of my fellow judges and realized, "No, no, no, that is real. That's real. That's happening. It's here. It's here in New Zealand." And yeah, I'm so annoyed that I can't judge that category now, but that's the kind of stuff that you hear about, that you'll find out about, and that is celebrated at these awards.
That's great. That's really cool. So we will look forward to participating in those events, and definitely encourage listeners to get along, especially if you haven't done previously. Then you should get along for the first time. Now, this is probably an impossible question to answer, but any sort of favourites that have sort of stuck in your mind from your years of sort of being involved, that their stories now have really blown you away. That
I have a real soft spot, obviously, given everything that I've been doing in the past. I've got a real soft spot for startups, and that's the space that I get the most excited about. I think that's your kind of harbinger of what's coming, right? And that's why I love the space so much. Last year, I think our startup of the year was, I'm just trying to think, was it the emerging company of the year was Tracksuit. The startup company of the year was Starboard Maritime Intelligence,
that's
which
right.
are doing this incredible job in making sure that our oceans are sustainable. And there was a highly commended data mask, and that was really an interesting one, which I really liked the idea of, because essentially it enables, AI means that you need vast amounts of data to train AI, but in areas that we really want to see some we really want to see breakthrough in AI, like medical health. You have all sorts of regulations in place necessarily to guard people's personal details. And so, therefore, that regulation, in a sense, stops our ability to gain huge forward movement using artificial intelligence in that particular sector. But data mask does exactly what it says on the tin. It masks the data in a way that allows you to scalably use these kinds of this kind of private data in a way that does not, impinge on privacy. I've probably completely killed their elevator pitch. That is not their elevator pitch. I'm sorry, DataMask. But last year I was super excited about them, as a startup. And then, of course, our company of the year last year was Rocket Lab. And is there a company in this country that has had a greater impact on an entire sector in the sense of birthing a sector? I mean, I feel like that's exactly what happened with Rocket Lab. It made it clear to Kiwi innovators all across the country that yes, we can do this, and yes, this is a sector. And this is really funny because I remember, I was here in Christchurch during the earthquake, and one of the neat things that I was part of, right, when I joined Ministry of Awesome in 2017, was this idea of, okay, well, what is Christchurch economy going to be? And we were able to kind of go, okay, what's the economy going to be? Spin the wheel, let's see, because the city had been decimated and our economy was in flux. Obviously, tech was carrying on, and Will McClellan and Colin had done their thing, creating a place for all tech companies in the epicenter. But still, we needed a vision, and that vision included aerospace at the time. And I remember thinking, no, seriously, really? Aerospace? That's not a thing. That's not a New Zealand thing. Little did I know, obviously, maybe I was super ignorant, but at the time, that was not a thing that I understood in Christchurch. But then it turns out we have a straight shot into polar orbit. It turns out that with all the Antarctica, so in other words, there were many reasons why New Zealand could lead in this particular sector. And Rocket Lab has been the Is the word harbinger? Probably not. It is the one visionary that then enabled everyone else to kind of go, yes, we can do this. So I'm obviously super excited about the aerospace sector and Rocket Lab and the impact that they've had.
Yeah, no, those are great examples. And look, I think it is important for us to keep telling these stories, keep reminding ourselves of the incredible achievements of those across the sector, and
Mm.
particularly even though we hear about the likes of Rocket Lab in the media, and they've followed globally. They're obviously listed in the US, and so they get all sorts of attention. I see their followers on, whether it's YouTube or what have you, that just keeps growing and growing and growing, a huge amount of attention. But we need to recognize that, hey, what companies like Rocket Lab and others that have really achieved great things and will go on to achieve a lot more in the future. They should keep inspiring us and keep encouraging us to lift our gaze a little bit higher and to have greater ambitions. So really encouraging. That's great. So
Yeah.
if you were to sort of look a little bit forward, how do you see the future of tech in New Zealand, playing out? What are the opportunities? Obviously, aerospace is one, and that's an area, has probably taken many of us sort of by surprise in terms of what has happened in recent years. But actually now it's a significant contributor to the New Zealand economy.
Mhm.
And, we have the potential for that just to keep growing. So that'll be a part of it. But yeah, what else do you see in the future?
I mean, I just want to do before we leave that one alone, aerospace. I want to do a shout out to Dawn Aerospace, who also won an award. Was it last year? And they have been a significant. They're building significant impact. They're absolutely so innovative in the work that they're doing. And then there's another one called Kia Aerospace that we haven't heard a lot about, but it's just this whole sector is bubbling something fierce. And the thing that makes me wild, I referred to this earlier, and I don't want to keep maligning my neighbors, but I say things like, oh, and Dawn Aerospace, and they go, who? And I go, Dawn Aerospace, they do this. And they go, oh wow, where are they? And I say, here in Christchurch. No idea.
Yeah,
No
yeah.
idea. Never heard of them. And I just can't believe that. I mean, I know we're in the sector and so maybe we're just blind to what the rest of the world is, but this should be known. These industries should be known. This kind of fame, if they were in the States, they'd be everywhere. So anyway, I'll leave that one alone. So what do I think is really, really coming up? I think one thing I'm super excited about is the biotech sector. There was what was the bill that, or the draft that was just introduced, the gene technology bill by Judith Collins,
Mm, mm.
which is going to open up that sector as well. Personally, it's going to have an impact, on me as well. I mean, sorry, the volunteer fire alarm is going off here.
Oh,
I don't know if
okay.
you can hear it.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, great timing. So one of the reasons I stepped down in February is because I discovered I had multiple myeloma, which is a blood cancer. And one of the main innovations in the blood cancer space and in the cancer space in general is CAR T cell, which is saving people's lives. And you can't get that here in New Zealand. And all of this incredible research and development is entirely necessary to improve our health outcomes globally, but also here in New Zealand. And in Christchurch, BioAura just signed a significant deal that is basically alongside the Malligan Institute, is creating a center of excellence for CAR T here in Christchurch, which to me is that's just, well, I mean, obviously it's life changing,
Yeah, I'm so sorry
but
you have to deal
but
with that.
for it's fine. It's one of those things that just kind of bubbles away. But yeah, that having that CAR T Center for Excellence is quite incredible, and it just shows how the growth of the sector is really coming on. It's catching on here in New Zealand. We have incredible talent working in the space. We're beginning to get some really strong investment in the space, and it's going to have an impact on our country, but also the innovations in the space that will come from New Zealand will affect, the whole world.
What do you see are the mechanisms that we need to put in place and the things that we need to change to be able to support the growth of these various sort of aspects of tech and innovation in New Zealand, where education seems to be something that's really important to you?
Education is a huge part of it. If you're looking at any of these sectors, it's talent and really highly capable talent that is going to contribute to growing the sector. Obviously, at the moment, people aren't speaking so much about the shortage of talent, but these things come in waves, right? What people are talking about is having access to highly capable talent. So, all of the things that were recommended in the previous Upstart Nation startup report are still absolutely necessary. And that's things like making sure that we have the right immigration settings so that we can bring in these highly talented individuals who want to come to New Zealand, but at this point they can't. They're blocked or it's too slow. And so we can't access, highly skilled startup operators or highly skilled tech operators from the rest of the world. And, dare I say it, there are so many of my fellow Americans. I'm American and Kiwi. So many of my fellow Americans are desperate to get out of Dodge, and they have in their minds that there's this incredible country called New Zealand, which is really a place where they want to invest their time, their energy, and their lives. And we should be in a position to take advantage of that. And at this point, we are not necessarily. And so, do we want to lose them to Australia? Do we want to lose them to Europe? No, we flipping well don't. We want them here
100%.
because we need them, and our tech sector can offer them fantastic opportunity, and they will end up growing our sector. They'll end up enabling our sector. So I think immigration settings are really important. Then there's things like the tax settings definitely need some work. And at the end of the day, we also, at this stage, we don't, RDTI has been great for our tech companies, and that's, what it was built for, but it's not be all and end all. And it's also incredibly difficult to essentially make those applications. They're not as straightforward as they need to be. You shouldn't have to hire a group of experts in order to make applications for RDTI, but that is generally where it is, unless someone on your team is really skilled at that. So there's a lot of things that need to be changed. I mean, obviously, we also need to bring on board under participating communities, and by that I mean women, Māori, Pacifica. These are all communities that are not necessarily participating at the level that we would really want them to be. And as a result of that, many of our tech companies are not as diverse as they can be. And that is obviously an equity thing, but even more so if you don't, if equity has fallen out of favor, which it seems to have in some parts of the world, if that has fallen out of favor, then the one thing that you need to think about is that the more diverse the makeup of your teams, the better the outcomes in terms of how well your company does. So it's really important that we harness that talent across all of New Zealand. I mean, I could go on, but then I would end up starting to read the Upstart Nation report, and all those recommendations are there, and they've been written about for a great long time.
How do you feel? We're at sort of from a political standpoint. Are there some dials and knobs that we really need to encourage current government to turn, to adjust and to change, to get things right so we can attract that international part of the talent? Obviously we want Kiwis to have a great chance, but every now and then we will hear about folks that haven't managed to make it to New Zealand, or scenarios where we're missing out to Australia or other countries. Sometimes it's the big folks, the billionaires and so on. I remember being in Queenstown a while back, and I think Jack Ma had just gone through town, and the suggestion was he was wanting to get a place in New Zealand, and we've had varying other people from the, I guess, the very wealthy end of the tech sector who have taken some interest in New Zealand. I don't know whether that should be part of the picture, as trying to attract them to New Zealand. Certainly we want people that are going to bring great expertise, as well as invest into New Zealand. We want that sort of thing to continue, I would pick. But there are also things from an educational perspective where government plays a role as well.
Personally, and this is personal, this is not the opinion of the NZ High Tech Trust. I just want to underline.
Yeah.
We could get into some seriously difficult territory here, but I'm not interested in New Zealand becoming a bolt hole for the ultra wealthy in tech. To me, that's of zero interest. And New Zealand has a unique positioning. It's not positioning in terms of marketing. It's positioning in terms of the reality. Having lived in this country for 20 years, well, just about 19, and that is that we are a country who celebrate innovation, and we are a meritocracy. Our politics and our business are transparent, and I like it that way. I also feel like we stand for equity and integrity. We have that reputation. We are always ranking in the kind of clean government, clean business stakes. We always do really well. But I also think our reputation in terms of being really innovative on how we deal with social problems is it's worldwide. Everyone knows about that. We have a reputation from that perspective. And I think that's a reputation that is really hard to earn and easy to lose. And would hate that to happen. I think that's why when I talk about startup operators and when I talk about immigration settings, I'm talking about people who are extremely capable, who have a great deal of experience in the tech sector, who want to move to New Zealand because they don't like what's happening in the United States. And I'm not passing judgment. I'm simply saying that that's a reaction. So they want to come to New Zealand, and they can help us supercharge our tech sector. We have huge talent here. We have great companies here, but you bring in people who've been working on a global level. At that level, you will see their impact very quickly. And not to mention that them as role models for the rest of the sector also will have an impact, and them as potential investors for the rest of the sector and for our startups will have a real impact. So for that reason, I mean, that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about talent. I'm not talking about Peter Thiel and his bolt hole. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking
Yeah.
about real startup operators, real people who remember what it's like to have to work for a living.
I hear you. Yeah, no, it's just
That was so rude. I'm
it-
sorry, Peter Thiel, but I'm kind of also not sorry.
No, it is one of those areas I have wondered about, because you'll get different people at all sorts of levels who come into the country, and maybe it is more towards the end that later on in their careers. And yeah, it's just interesting to see the different ways that they get involved in the tech sector here, and in differing ways. So yeah, no, that's
And
good.
remember, we have amazing Kiwis who are working overseas. They are global startup operators. They would like to return home, but there's some issues of taxation and double taxation that mean that in order to do that, they'd really have to, they'd have to martyr themselves to some extent in order to do that. And we want them home. We want them to come home. We want them to, bring all that talent and all that energy and all that, pride in being Kiwi back home to lift the rest of the sector. So we want to enable that, don't we? I think you were asking me about the government and current government and what do I think about them and the sector. I think we've got huge fans in our current government. Judith Collins, I have all the time in the world for, and this is part of her portfolio. She's Minister for Tech, and she is a constant ambassador for our sector. She's making her impact known, and that's something I'm hugely appreciative of. I mean, already the gene technology bill and many more. She's a real fan of the Upstart Nation report, and all of those recommendations came up in the previous high tech awards. And she's obviously commissioned the Gluckman report, which is going to be around more the R&D end of our sector. And so we're going to start seeing changes around that. And I'm appreciating that concentration and that focus. But what I feel like I am missing overall is the vision. What is the vision that the government agrees to? What is their vision for our tech sector? Where do they see that sitting in their list of priorities? Obviously, it's a top priority for Minister Collins, but at the same time, gosh, I mean, how many portfolios does that woman have? She's like a superhuman across the globe, taking care of each parts of those portfolios. So we need to get a little bit more support potentially across the whole government for the sector, given the impact in our future that the sector will have.
Yeah, yeah, and of course we've just been we're going through a little bit of a shake up and a rejig of those portfolios. So that's all kind of happening right now, or
Oh my goodness, yes.
just happening as well. So yeah, interesting to see how all of that plays out, and what will that mean, but. Yeah, look, I think there's obviously an important role the government play, but a key part of it is as technologists and those within the tech sector and founders and so on, really it's largely up to us to get in there and to make
That's
things
right.
happen, doesn't it?
It's driven by the
Ultimately,
sector, not
yeah.
pointing any fingers.
Yeah.
It's definitely driven by the sector.
Yeah, and look, that's one of the reasons that I love the New Zealand High Tech Awards, because it does shine that light and allow us to look at the best of the best and to be able to learn from each other. So a bit of encouragement there for startups and other tech firms that are listening. Definitely get involved, get along to the events, make sure you're participating in the awards. We love sharing some of those stories here on the New Zealand Tech Podcast too. So even if you're not sure if you're maybe ready to be on a podcast, get in touch. It's always helpful for us to hear from the companies, and when the time's right, we can help shine a bit of a light there, as well as we tend to do often varying times during the year, but particularly around the high tech awards as well with some of the winners. Anything else that you wanted to add into the conversation, Marian, before we finish up?
Yeah, I just wanted to say a huge thank you and some acknowledgement to all the team at New Zealand Tech. That organization has been so incredibly effective over the last many years in ensuring that all of the impediments in the way of the sector are identified and removed bit by bit. And without New Zealand Tech, I honestly don't know where we would be. Obviously, the New Zealand High Tech Awards happens once a year, and there are the lead ups and so on. But New Zealand Tech, as an organization, is 365 days a year, 24/7, constantly working on ensuring the sector leads and grows, and making sure that all of the companies who are part of the tech sector have as little friction as possible in their growth and the realization of their goals. And I think that's quite incredible. I was looking at some of the reports and the briefing to minister, and essentially the education that's done by New Zealand Tech to the parties that can assist, and to its own members, and that information is there's so much of it, and it's just critical. I love the work that See Tomorrow First has done, all of it in making an impact around the world to understand what is happening in New Zealand, how important the sector is for the world. Yeah, so basically kudos to everyone at New Zealand Tech, and thank you for doing the incredible job that you do.
Yeah, they do a great job. It's and I guess that's the reality. It takes a lot of people doing a lot of things to support the tech sector.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's certainly appreciated, and probably we need to get them back on the show again as well. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Really really nice to have you on the New Zealand Tech Podcast, and of course a big thank you also to our show partners, to 1NZ, Spark, 2 Degrees, HP, and Gorilla Technology. And we'll look forward to catching up with some of you during the year. And as I say, if you're a startup or maybe another sort of tech company that feel that you should be featured on the New Zealand Tech Podcast, certainly get in touch through our website. So thanks, everyone. We'll catch you again next week. And thanks again, Marian.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Our pleasure.
Nice to talk to you, Paul.
Cheers.
Bye.
The New Zealand Tech Podcast, brought to you by Gorilla Technology, proactive and strategic IT.